From old to new.
In this episode, we learn how to move ideas from old to new.
To facilitate reader understanding, we should begin with ideas that are familiar to the reader and move to the ideas that are new to the reader. So, to talk about something, first introduce it and then provide some information about it.
This is an actual TOEFL sentence insertion question. The passage is about the British land enclosure movement. Let's first look at the sentences and then consider the target sentence.
Z. Between 1714 and 1820, over 6 million acres of English land were enclosed. A. As a result, many small, independent farmers were forced to sell out simply because they could not compete. B. Non-land-holding peasants and cottage workers who worked for wages and grazed cows or pigs on the village common were also hurt when the common was no longer available. C. It was such people who began to flock to the cities seeking employment and who found work in the factories that would transform the nation and the world. D. Where would the sentence best fit? Cities not only provide job opportunities but also profoundly affect social patterns, standards of living, political movements, and ideologies. This question can be hard since the target sentence does not have any logical clue words like demonstrative words or transitional words. The only clue is that the target sentence talks about the role of cities. So we know that the target sentence should come after the introduction of the word cities. Z, A, B have no mention of city. They talk about the effect of the enclosure movement on peasants and villagers. And there is a good logical flow of ideas, so the order is as they are. C is where the word cities appears. Since C talks about cities, the target sentence must be either before C or after C. To determine which one, we should examine which sentence is most closely connected to B. C follows directly after B as it discusses what happened to the people in B. That is, peasants and villagers moved to cities to find jobs, and this event led to national transformation. By contrast, the target sentence only talks about the role of cities. Since B and C are cohesive, the target sentence should come after C. Answer: D.
Let's consider another question based on the enclosure movement. Pause the video and try to answer by yourself. The key content word in the target sentence is transportation. Only option B has the word transportation. B introduces the word transportation, but the target sentence talks about the details of transportation. For this reason, the target sentence should come after B. The following two questions are based on wind pollination. Question 1.
A. Wind pollination requires a lot of pollen to ensure that at least some of the pollen reaches the target tree, but dispersing the pollen is crucial as well. B. There are various adaptations to help as much of the pollen go as far as possible. C. Most deciduous wind-pollinated trees produce their pollen in the spring while the branches are bare of leaves to reduce the surrounding surfaces that compete with the stigmas, the part of the flower that receives the pollen, for pollen. D. Target sentence. Evergreen conifers, which do not shed their leaves, have less to gain from spring flowering, and, indeed, some flower in the autumn or winter. The only logical clue in the target sentence is less to gain from spring flowering. So the previous sentence must be talking about some gain from spring flowering. A and B do not talk about spring flowering at all. C talks about deciduous wind-pollinated trees producing their pollen in the spring. Producing pollen in the spring basically means spring flowering. So the target sentence should come either before C or after C. C says spring flowering is advantageous for deciduous wind-pollinated trees. So, deciduous wind-pollinated trees have more to gain from spring flowering than evergreen conifers do. Since we are looking for a sentence that talks about more to gain from spring flowering, which is C, the target sentence should come after C. Answer: D.
Question 2. Pause the video and try to answer by yourself. The key word in the target sentence is insects. So we need to look for an option with the word insects. Only B has the keyword. B talks about the characteristics of Anemophilous pollens, one of which is that they have very low nutritional value. This explains why they are not pollinated by insects. The target sentence says insects do sometimes pollinate Anemophilous plants, specifically when there is not enough food from Anemophilous flowers. So between B and the target sentence, B introduces insects and the target sentence provides more details on insects. So the target sentence should come after B. In this episode, we learned how to move ideas from old to new. In the next episode, we'll learn how to move ideas from general to specific.